Hello everyone and welcome back to CRTV 131 Contemporary American Cinema, and this is class number 10. We are working our way through film history and we are up into the early 1990s. Let's see what's in store. Independent cinema starts taking hold in this period. A little bit away from studio films. These are people like Quentin Tarrentino and the Coen brothers and Steven Soderbergh, all of whom I will mention through this, who started off getting independent funding for their films, taking them to film festivals and looking for a distribution deal. That is the key. A number of very talented filmmakers can get funding for a movie, max out credit cards, GoFundMe's, whatever, and then you need to get it to be seen by more and more people. That's the whole idea anyway. So you go off to a film festival, and here we see the Sundance Film Festival in Utah, and that is a big proving ground for young filmmakers. I always liken it to professional sports scouts going to maybe high school basketball games or high school football games or even college basketball or football games and looking for new talent, somebody that might be able to make it into the major leagues or the professional leagues. And that's kind of what happens at film festivals. Movie studio people go out to these film festivals and they are looking for films from directors or writers or actors, but usually for director writers, to see if maybe they have the possibility of making it in Hollywood and in the studio system. And so young filmmakers are looking for a distribution deal. They have skills in directing and writing and shooting and lighting and all that kind of stuff, but the whole idea of exhibiting and distributing a film, marketing a film, is something that's way beyond their skill set. You have to have relationships with cinema chains all across the country, AMC and Regal and all that. You need to do some advertising, maybe in the local press, maybe online, maybe get your clients. Sometimes some of these independent films have more or less famous actors, maybe like Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction. So you want to get them booked into talk shows, things like that, and promoting the film, right? Distributing and promoting and exhibiting. That's a whole nother thing that the studios are really good at. So even if you manage to get enough funding to make your movie, the second part, marketing, is something that you really need a lot of help in. So you go to the film festival, maybe you win some awards, audience favorite or a golden palm or something like that, and a studio rep bids on your film. Maybe you spent $5 or $6 or $7 million on your movie, and so they will offer you maybe a small profit, right? $6 million movie, maybe they offer you $7 or $8 million. You make a small profit. You can pay off your investors. Very important. Investors like the idea of getting paid off. And then very likely they will maybe try to get it into theaters. Maybe it will go somewhere else like Netflix. And very likely they will lose money. Okay, 99 out of 100 times the studios will lose money on small independent films. But every once in a while, something will break through. Little Miss Sunshine or Napoleon Dynamite or Blair Witch Project. Something like that will break through and make lots and lots of money, maybe even $100 million like Blair Witch. So where are you as the filmmaker? Do you get any of those profits? Very likely no. Very likely no. The studio took a big chance on you. Most of the times their chance taking is a big roll of the dice and they lose a lot of money. So what do you get out of the deal? Well, hopefully you get a career. That's the thing that you really want, is a career. Sure, it would be nice to share in some of those huge profits, but the idea is to get some kind of a career going so that you can get another directing project and maybe some more. So they take the lion's share of the profits off of that wonderful movie that you made. And hopefully you will be around for years to come, like Steven Soderbergh and Quentin Tarrentino, and have a career going. So they are very important, these film festivals. This is the Sundance. There are plenty of other film festivals around, local film festivals, city film festivals, international film festivals. They all cost a bit of money to enter. They all go through a rigorous screening process. There's a pretty good one, an older one that started, I don't know, I think in the 1940s in Cannes, which is in the south of France on the Riviera. Toronto has a really good one, quite highly regarded. Telluride also has one, I think that's in Colorado. There's a Tribeca Film Festival. There's an LA Film Festival. They're all over the place. Berlin has one. I usually center on Sundance because it is a really good one for independent films. Some of the others, like Toronto, are particularly good for studio films that are maybe a little bit on the arty side, hopefully to win Oscars and things like that, rather than the big studio films that are part of franchises and things like that, like maybe James Bond or Marvel or something like that. So, speaking of film festivals, our next director, Quentin Tarantino, that's how he came through. Okay, he started writing. He wrote the scripts for a couple of films. Then, like a lot of directors, he decided he would like to be directing his own work. And he got a chance with Reservoir Dogs and got it through film festivals and so on, and got a little bit more notice. And then his second film, Pulp Fiction, really struck the big time, made over $100 million at the box office, which is really a lot of money for not a big CGI action type of movie. There's some action and some shooting and things like that, but it's not really an action movie the way a James Bond movie or a Fast and Furious movie would be an action movie. So this film, Pulp Fiction, it did a lot to bring some of these stars to the forefront. And there's a couple of them right there. There's also Bruce Willis and people like that floating through the film. It is very famously non-linear, so it jumps around. We will see some characters die in one scene, and then later in the movie they will be magically alive again. So it is taking place over about a 24 to maybe 36-hour period. So not very long, maybe a day, day and a half, something like that. And it's in the kind of in the underworld, and we will have some hitmen and boxers and girlfriends and people like that, drugs, heroin, all that kind of stuff. It's all kind of mixed around and mixed through, and out of order as well. So if you choose to watch this film, you got to put your devices down. You can't be looking at other things. You can't be scrolling through messages and stuff like that, or you will totally get lost. So again, if you're gonna go through this film, and it is a fantastic film, and it's justifiably famous, and people have been probably telling you about this movie for a long time, and it's R-rated. So now maybe you feel like it's time to watch this movie, and you have papers to write, and so this is a good excuse. Right now's the time to catch up on some of these wonderful movies that you've been hearing about since you were younger. Maybe this one, maybe Fight Club, maybe Goodfellas, who knows what. And so now it's a good time to maybe catch up on some of this stuff. So think about finally watching Pulp Fiction or some of those other films that I mentioned. I've tried to put the scenes in order, so when you do watch them, I've got about 3 or 4 of them, and I think they are in order. When I would show this in class, I would just put a DVD in and show about the first 15 or 20 minutes of the film, but unfortunately YouTube doesn't have it quite that nice and easy for me. But I think I found most of the scenes that go through that opening segment. One of the things that Quentin Tarantino is particularly known for are his pop culture references, and this movie has a ton of them, and they range from maybe giving a foot massage, TV show pilots, and what do they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Europe, where they're on the metric system. And instead of just stopping the film and letting people think, oh, how funny that is, and how cute that is, and so on, that they're talking about this or that, Tarantino's really his talent or his genius is to somehow thread it through the film so that it pulls the film along. It doesn't stop the film. It pulls the film along, and there will be times where the callbacks to some of those things, like massages and quarter pounders and things like that. And unfortunately, a lot of directors, especially in the 90s, tried to do a Tarantino Pulp Fiction. Let's have some cute talk about pop culture. What kind of breakfast cereal do you like? Captain Crunch, or Cheerios or something, or who do you like better, Elvis or the Beatles? And you got to be really careful doing this, because your audience can just start going off track and start thinking about that and lose the thread of the plot. So Tarantino manages to insert this fun pop culture reference that people in the audience can identify with, but still somehow manage to pull the film along and not stop it in its tracks. So here we are at the dance-off, and especially fun. John Travolta was known for dancing in Grease, and known for dancing in Saturday Night Fever and Midnight Cowboy. So he was became famous as a dancer. Not Uma Thurman so much, but Travolta for sure. And so now having a little bit of fun with Travolta, the noted dancer from the 70s and 80s, out there on the dance floor at Jackrabbit Slim's, kind of a 1950s throwback diner. And that was the most important part of the movie, building that giant set for Jackrabbit Slim's. So if you watch the film and you do your research on it, you'll see that that was the most expensive part of the movie, that sequence at Jackrabbit Slim's. And like I said, be careful. It is very famously non-linear. Some more of his films: Jackie Brown, Kill Bill, Part 1 and Part 2. It was going to be a big movie, 3.5 hour movie, and he wisely chopped it in half. I shouldn't say chop, but he wisely edited it into 2 parts, and they were released, I think, about a year apart. And then Inglourious Bastards, and yes, the misspelling is on purpose, set during World War II, and Django Unchained, set during the Civil War. So not pop culture references so much in those 2. And then Hateful Eight, also a Western. I'm not sure that you call Django Unchained a Western. It's set during the Civil War, so kind of guns and stuff like that, but slavery and plantations and that sort of thing. But I would put Inglourious Basterds, which is a kind of a rewriting of history of World War II and Hitler and so on, and Django Unchained, a sort of kind of a rewriting of history of the Civil War, and put that into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or put that with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as a trilogy of films that are having a little bit of fun with established history, doing a little bit of rewriting, making it a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more palatable, I guess, for a lot of people. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is set in the summer of 1969, and lurking in the background, it's not real central, but lurking in the background is Charles Manson and the Tate LaBianca murders in August of 1969. Like I said, it's not centrally about that, but it does come into play, and there is a little bit of rewriting of history. You might think about boning up on your history and the Charles Manson murders and all that sort of thing, so that you'll get what is real and what has been rewritten or reimagined. And it is set in 1969. The set design, the clothes, even Hollywood. It's set in Hollywood and driving up and down Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset Boulevard, very, very close to the way it was back then. Most of it was redressing of stores and sets and that sort of thing. They didn't really redo Hollywood in CGI. They really did most of it with putting in new signs and things like that, and then getting lots and lots of cars from that era to drive up and down the streets, and so on. So nominated for lots of Oscars, Best Picture, Actor, Actress, all that, or Actor, Supporting Actor. Brad Pitt did win for Supporting Actor. Good for him. He does a fantastic job in the film as Leonardo DiCaprio's stunt double. It's mostly set in Hollywood, in the world of television, and Leonardo DiCaprio, his character, was the star of a Western TV show, and Western TV shows were really big in the late 50s and into the early 60s. At one point, on three network channels, ABC, NBC, and CBS, on 3 channels, there were 30 Westerns. There were 30 Westerns somewhere around 1959, 1960. They were really big and really popular, and so this works out quite nice. There are some shows were real, some were sort of made up. It's kind of hard to tell the difference. They do such a good job of integrating all of that into this world. And Leo's character is not the star of a TV show anymore. Mostly he is guest starring on other shows, westerns and things like that, and cop shows and so on. But a lot of times he's playing the bad guy, and that might not be the best place for his career. In the meantime, Brad Pitt's character has a run-in with some of the Manson family, and it all ties together quite nicely, I have to say. So after you watch that opening scene in the apartment for Pulp Fiction, there are some wonderful pop culture references that you might not exactly get. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun and maybe help you out a little bit. At one point early on, Samuel L. Jackson says to one of the guys lying on the sofa, "You, Floccus Eagles." Okay, it goes by kind of fast. What does that mean? You, Floccus Eagles. Okay, well, Floccus Eagles were a 1980s hair band, and the young guy lying on the sofa there with sort of the big hair, and so it goes by real fast. It goes by real fast, but that's what he's referencing is Floccus Eagles. Also, they talk about what do they call a quarter pounder in Europe, and at the very beginning, John Travolta's character is telling Samuel L. Jackson's character they're driving around in a car on their way to their morning appointment, you might say, about how Amsterdam is so liberal when it comes to um, hash bars and marijuana and all that sort of thing. And I was in Europe a couple of summers ago, and we went through Amsterdam. We have some Dutch friends, and we went through Amsterdam. This is a Dutch coffee shop. They have Starbucks there, and they don't sell marijuana or anything like that at Starbucks. So they have like regular traditional coffee shops. But otherwise, for some reason, it's centered around coffee shops. Here's Easy Times coffee shop, and that's where they would be selling marijuana, and you can sit outside and smoke and so on. Here's another one, coffee shop Smoky. And a lot of times I think, especially in Amsterdam, it's a lot of tourists that are going in. I don't know that the Dutch feel a great need to smoke in hash bars and places like that. But anyway, there it is, nice. I love that sign, neon, palm tree, all that kind of stuff. They also have this wonderful conversation about McDonald's and quarter pounders and all that kind of stuff. So I decided I better take some pictures while I was in Amsterdam and while I was in Paris with my wife and our friends. And so here we are in a Paris McDonald's, and you can see the menu right there. It's all very nice with Heineken, and I'm not sure where wine is. It seems like they would have wine there too, but they have Heineken, and you'd get it sometimes in a glass, sometimes in a plastic cup. Zero in here a little bit more. There we go. There's Heineken, and whatever size you need. Okay. A euro is about $1.12, something like that. So that's, a little less than $3, I guess. Not too bad. Especially for, a big city like Paris, right downtown. Prices tend to be high in, all big cities where the tourists hang out. And there is our Royale with cheese. And after watching that scene in the movie, you'll know that Royale with cheese, because they don't know what a quarter pounder is, because they're on the metric system and all that. Melted cheese, fondue there. And at another point, he's going to ask, Travolta's character is going to ask, do you know what they put on their French fries in Holland? And he's going to say mayonnaise. Okay, and yes, it's true, our Dutch friends, young daughters, when we were in Paris, they had to order a side of mayonnaise. So there you go. And maybe it's not so odd if you think about it a little bit, because a lot of us in the U.S. Will put sour cream all over a baked potato. And so, yeah, sure, more fatty, eggy, dairy stuff. So maybe not so bad. In Canada, they would be using vinegar. Okay, vinegar, sort of like a shake of vinegar or spray of vinegar over it, and salt, and sometimes a kind of a gravy, poutine. So everybody, wherever you go, there's something a little bit different. But I have to say, in the mass media class, and we talk about advertising, and I pull up some McDonald's menus from China and India and places like that. And of course, it's all different wherever you go around the world. But one of the constants at McDonald's, whether they're serving rice or whether they're serving meatless burgers, like in India where they have lots of vegetarians, just about everybody on the planet likes French fries. Kind of odd. I think everybody likes French fries and ice cream. I'm not sure what else is universal like that. Maybe spaghetti or pasta, but it's a big favorite everywhere you go. Okay, so staying overseas, we're off to Scotland, and Danny Boyle. He is a British director, and he works in many genres. I'm going to zero in on his second film, Trainspotting. It's still one of the ones he's really known for. It was a sequel, not remade or anything, or rebooted. The sequel was made with all these characters 20 years later in 2017. And so I will link to as many scenes as I can from Trainspotting. There's Ewan McGregor down here. He's our central character. Renton and some other characters that you might recognize. There is a rather famous and rather gross scene set in a public toilet in a off-track betting parlor there, and our hero and most of his friends are heroin addicts, and they speak in very thick Scottish accents, a brogue it's called. And so you might turn subtitles on in the YouTube clip that I'm going to link to, so you can understand what they're saying, because it's English all right, but it's pretty thick and a little hard to understand. And he's very frank about being a heroin addict. It's based on a book, and there have actually been a couple of sequels to the book. They haven't made that prequel and sequels and everything to the movie. One sequel, but at one point he is going to need to do some really awful stuff in the restroom there in order to get his heroin back. And yes, it's really gross. I'm not sure. I haven't found all of the clips yet, and I'm not sure how much of it they're gonna link to on YouTube. YouTube's been pretty good about finding all my favorite scenes, so I'm guessing that it's there. And so you might think, well, why did they do that? Why did you have to show all that? And if you think about it a little bit, it's really how the depths that you will go to for your drug habit. Okay, he needs to have his heroin. No matter how he gets it, he will do just about anything to get it. And that is, I think, pretty much the point. And people will sell their bodies for drugs, perform awful things, degrading, and so on, all to get enough money for their next hit. And that's pretty much what's going on, the central part. It seems kind of fun and kind of funny, and the things that they're doing, and so on. A little bit like Clockwork Orange. On the surface, it looks like it's this weird movie about these awful people on the fringes of society and so on. But it does really have something underneath. It really has a point underneath it. All of the jokey exterior. So really, really a great movie. It holds up quite well over all these years. And as I said, Danny Boyle works in many genres. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to match the genre with a picture or anything like that. The questions are going to be about Trainspotting and so on. But I thought I'd put up his films here for you. Adventure drama, a horror zombie movie, 28 Days Later, Millions, which is kind of a family comedy. Some young kids find a whole bunch of stolen money in a bag thrown off a train. Sunshine, which is a sci-fi film, pretty hard science type sci-fi film, not fantasy type stuff with laser swords and stuff like that. It's a real hard sci-fi film, quite good. Slumdog Millionaire is the film that won Danny his directing and his Best Picture Oscars. And very good. Also nonlinear. It does jump around a little bit in time. 127 Hours, Trance, Steve Jobs. And yesterday, I just caught yesterday recently and pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. You might check it out. I'm not sure where it is, if it's on Netflix or HBO or whatever. But for me, a lot of times I am looking for the director of the film, and it almost doesn't matter what the film is about, whether it's a detective movie or whether it's a war movie or a this movie or that movie. If it's a good director, if it's Steven Spielberg or Stanley Kubrick or somebody like that, Quentin Tarantino, normally I might not think, gee, do I want to watch a movie about the Civil War? But Quentin Tarantino, sure, I will watch that. And maybe you're getting a little bit of that as well. And that's a big part of what I'm trying to do in this class, is to introduce you to directors. It's a very director-centric class, and auteur-driven, you might say. We've talked about this a couple of times in the past, I think even on the first day of class. And so a lot of this, I want to show you a film from a director. If you're into it, maybe like Fight Club or something like that, well, here are some other movies the same director did. And a lot of times you can become a fan of a director. I know there are fans of Quentin Tarantino, and they will watch anything that Quentin does. And I think a lot of directors are worthy of that sort of following. Okay, he's a pretty good director. She's a pretty good director. They're pretty good directors. And you end up thinking, well, I'd watch anything the Coen brothers do. Okay, they're fantastic. So, same thing for Danny Boyle. Sometimes you might see a subject, you might not think that it's the one for you, but he's a good director. Check him out. Okay, speaking of good directors, of course, they're all good directors here today. And we have David Fincher's Fight Club. And there we have Brad Pitt. And oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name. It will come to me. Edward Norton. And in Fight Club, based on a book, Chuck Palahniuk. And I've got some scenes for you. I've tried to lay them out in the right order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 6 scenes, and normally it would be a lot easier for me with my DVD, but as we watch this, there's a lot of stuff going on, and so in class I would ask you to we would watch the film first, or the clips first, and then I would say, let's talk about this. What have you seen? And we have talked about framing devices already. We've talked about voiceover. We've talked about nonlinear plot. We've talked about breaking the fourth wall. And hopefully you will have seen all of that and picked it up on your own. Okay, there are flash frames of Brad Pitt's character. There are text animations from IKEA and the IKEA nesting instinct. There's a dream sequence in there as well. And so as you watch those scenes, it's most of the stuff that I would have shown in class. I hope you will see those. One of the things we talk about in class is anything unusual in a movie. Okay, anything unusual, and voiceover and nonlinear and breaking the fourth wall, they're all sort of unusual. They're not all that common. A number of movies do it, but the vast majority of movies are told in the third person, pretty much straight on through. Most Marvel movies, most James Bond movies, most Harry Potter movies don't do all this weird stuff the way maybe Woody Allen does, or the way David Fincher does with the flash frames and text and all that kind of stuff. And they are good, big, very successful type movies. But when we get these odd, out-of-the-way kinds of movies like this, then we like to call attention to it, right? Anything that's a little bit unusual, and this movie has all that stuff all through it. So what are the themes? Again, if you watched the clips first and then come back to this, hopefully you would be able to pick up on some of the themes running through the film. Identity, for sure. It's a big key part of it. Manhood is another theme running through the film. This film has a big reveal right at the end. A number of really good movies have big reveals at the end. Of course, even though these movies have been out for 10 or 20 or 60 years, like Psycho, we're still not going to reveal this stuff, at least to our friends. We're not in the classroom, but we would not want to reveal the big reveal in this film. Now that it's not in theaters anymore, even though it's, I don't know, 21 years old or so, we don't want to reveal too much. Sleep, we're going to see quite a bit. Edward Norton's character travels quite a bit for his job on airplanes, and he mentions you wake up in Seattle, you wake up in LA, then you're in Denver, then you're in Kansas, and so on. And so sleep is a big problem of his, and that's going to cause other problems for him as well. And consumerism also is certainly one of the themes for the film. So kind of helping you out there if you're going to write your paper on this one. There's a little bit of help there on some of the themes. We're also going to get a wonderful metaphor. There is a very rundown and very decayed house, and directors and writers, they love to use the architecture metaphor. Fix up the house is sort of like fixing yourself up, cleaning up everything, or repairing, or building, or that sort of thing. It usually is a metaphor for the character. Okay, so using a metaphor for the character. Cleaning up the house or cleaning up the whatever is a metaphor for them sort of getting their act together. And so at the beginning, when these guys meet, this house is really run down, and water is soaking through it almost like a porous as a sponge, and the lights are going out and the water faucets don't work. And that's really a metaphor for these characters here. So David Fincher, American director, and he likes dark lighting and very much downbeat endings, that's for sure, downbeat endings. Fluid tracking shots, for sure. And he's done 3 films with Brad Pitt. That's not a lot, not when you get down to like Tim Burton and Johnny Depp, or Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro. So that's not like 7, 8, 9, not a lot, but so far that's the most. He did Alien 3, so coming off the sequel, Aliens, right? The 2 big, huge, successful movies. Alien, Ridley Scott, Aliens, James Cameron, and here, poor David Fincher with Alien 3, and he got roundly booed on that. A lot of Alien fans didn't like the direction he took the film, but it definitely looks like a David Fincher film with all of that dark and downbeat and all of that. 7, a film about a serial killer. That's one of the Brad Pitt films. Fight Club, The Game, Panic Room, Zodiac, another serial killer film. And then kind of the odd film out of this whole group would be Benjamin Button. And that is another Brad Pitt film. It's more of a fantasy. There are no mass killings or murders or thrills or anything like that. It's a very interesting film. I usually talk about it toward the end of the semester when I talk about CGI and so on. But the character, Benjamin Button, is aging backwards. He is born as a small infant, like he would be, like a newborn, but he's about 80 or 85 years old, and as he goes through his life, he gets younger and younger. Of course, he gets taller and so on. And so kind of a fantasy. It's a really fun movie, very un-David Fincher-like. but a really good film, and you might check that one out. Benjamin Button, Social Network, about Mark Zuckerberg and the founding of Facebook, Facebook. Kind of dark, really. He paints him as not a very likable person and lights the film in dark ways and so on. So it really does feel like a David Fincher film. It's not about killings and murders and stuff. Girl with a Dragon Tattoo and Gone Girl also are drama, thriller, whatever kinds of movies. Very David Fincher-like films. Okay, next up, Clint Eastwood. And I could have put him all through this class because he's been directing since the 1970s, since 1971. So he's of that era with Spielberg and Scorsese and those people and Francis Coppola. But he seems to be kind of a late bloomer. Most of his Oscar wins, and he's got 2 Best Directing Oscars, have been in the 90s and 2000s. So that's why I stick him a little bit later in the class than way back in the 1970s. And Clint started in the Hollywood studio system. He was under contract, I don't know, maybe it was Universal or somewhere in the 1950s. He did some television shows. In particular, he did Rawhide, a big Western. I mentioned back there with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood how Westerns were a big thing in America on television in the 1950s and 1960s, and Clint Eastwood was definitely a part of that. And in the summer, he went off to Europe to make what were called spaghetti westerns. And they were called spaghetti westerns because the director, Sergio Leone, was Italian. So they were called spaghetti westerns. They were shot in Spain because Spain has a big chunk of the country that looks like the American Southwest. The center part of Spain is very desert-like. And if you're a European and you want to make a American Western style movie, you go to Spain. So he made those movies: A Fistful of Dollars, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and so on. A Few Dollars More, Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly especially was a big hit in about 1966 or 67. And so Clint became a movie star and started off with Westerns, and not too long in, he wanted to try his hand at directing. I think a lot of people didn't take him very seriously as a director, but sometimes if you're a movie star and you can say, I want to direct, then a lot of times studios want to keep you on their good side, right? They say, well, who knows if this guy's a very good director or not, but we definitely want to be in the Clint Eastwood business, so we'll let him make his passion project, we'll let him make his movie, and then he will be happy to come back to make more movies that make lots and lots of money. That's the thought. That's usually how it works, is they will let actors and actresses do their little passion project, hoping to keep them on good terms and to come back and to make more monies with them and so on. And every once in a while, like Clint Eastwood and a few others, they turn out to be pretty darn good directors and do a lot of that sort of thing and win awards and all of that. So that's what happened to Clint. He could make movies often if he would star in them. Okay, that's a little bit another form of insurance for the studios, for the money people. They're putting a lot of money, millions of dollars, into a movie for this untried director, or a director that's barely made 2 or 3 or 4 movies. But Mr. Eastwood, if you will star in the movie as well as direct it, then sure, we will fund it for you. So that's another way that movie stars get to make their movies if they will agree to star in it. So I would be showing Unforgiven, a Western toward the end of Eastwood's career. This is maybe 20 years ago. Remember, he's been making movies since the 70s, so this is from the 90s. And a very revisionist type of Western film. He's pretty much a bad guy, but the people he's against are even worse. And that's something that Hollywood has done a couple of times with The Godfather. We have this mafia family, but the people that are even worse than Michael Corleone and that family are other mob families and so on. So that's one way that writers and directors and studios have of sort of getting us to pull for very unlikable, very unsavory people. And we have this guy, William Money, and he's a retired killer. He's killed all sorts of people, women and children, as they say or remind him throughout the movie. And what happens? The inciting event is a cowboy in a small western town. A prostitute that he's with laughs at him, and he becomes very angry and cuts her up. He doesn't kill her, but he cuts her face, and that's part of how she makes her living. And the sheriff only finds the saloon owner that he has to, the cowboy has to pay the saloon owner, not the prostitute or the madam of the prostitutes and so on. But the saloon owner is going to be losing income, so he tells the cowboy that he's going to have to pay the saloon owner a couple of horses, I think it is, something like that. The ladies, the other prostitutes, the girls, are very upset at this injustice, and they gather their savings together to hire a killer, a bounty hunter. And they put out a bounty on the cowboy's head and say, you know, we want justice for our friend. So he's kind of seeking justice for this poor girl who's been cut up and so on. But he's not really a very likable kind of a guy. And so some good scenes from Unforgiven. I've got two of them. I think they come one right after another. I don't know why they break them where they do, but I've got them one right after another toward the end of the movie. And it's quite a good shootout. I think you'll enjoy it. So I thought we'd zero in a little bit on actors who direct. That is Warren Beatty right there. I don't know what he's directing, but that's Warren Beatty. Clyde from Bonnie and Clyde and a number of other movies, and he has won the directing Oscar. Most of these, let me see, Clint has won a directing Oscar. Woody has. Charlie hasn't, but they weren't really doing that when he was at his peak. Beatty has. Redford has. Affleck has. Clooney has been nominated but hasn't won. Jodie has been nominated but hasn't won for directing. And then both Carl and Rob Reiner have done some fantastic work. When Harry Met Sally and wonderful films like that too, but they haven't won Oscars. But I'm sure there's a much longer list than that, but those are some primary actors that began as actors who got into directing and have done so quite successfully. So Clint Eastwood, like Woody Allen and the Coen brothers, two in particular, that I think pair up quite interestingly. All three of those low budgets, and they win Oscars. And studios like that. Studios a lot of times would rather roll the dice on a much bigger bet. They'd rather roll the dice on a superhero movie or a Marvel movie or a Harry Potter type movie, right? Throw 200 or 300 million dollars at the screen, and with a big bet, sometimes you get a really big payoff. But the kinds of movies that these three make, it's almost like pocket change, I think, to studios. Really, it's like borrowing $10 instead of 100, right? Um, and so that's a nice pairing. Million Dollar Baby, he won Best Picture and Directing and Actress Oscars for that one. It's about a female boxer. And Gran Torino, Sudden Impact, one of his Dirty Harry movies. Dirty Harry is a police detective, and I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing right there. I think he's Dirty Harry there, directing back in the 70s or 80s, probably. Okay, so next up we have Baz Luhrmann. He's Australian, revisionist. He takes a classic genre type movie, like Shakespeare, and does Romeo and Juliet. Musical, he does Moulin Rouge, and also Great Gatsby. So a lot of fun. He is definitely a stylist of his own. You can look at a Baz Luhrmann film in about 10 or 15 minutes. You can tell pretty fast that's one of his films. And I put in there anachronistic because he likes using, especially music, other things too, sometimes language, but especially music. So this film here, Moulin Rouge, and yes, it has the exclamation point from 2001, kind of helping to get musicals restarted again. There weren't too many musicals in the 90s that weren't Walt Disney animated movies. Okay, so aside from Little Mermaid and Lion King and Aladdin, there weren't too many musicals coming out of Hollywood in the 1990s. And then Baz comes along and does Moulin Rouge and kind of kicks it off. And we get Chicago, and we get La La Land, and a few more musicals since Moulin Rouge kicking it off. And so this is set. The film is set in 1900 in Paris, but the music is going to be David Bowie, and it's going to be Nirvana, and it's going to be Elton John and Paul McCartney, and lots of much more modern songs that they're going to sing. It's not going to be background music. They're going to sing those songs in the movie, and that is out of time, right? Anachronistic. Okay, it's of a different time, or out of time, out of the right time sequence, and it's a lot of fun. You'll recognize so much of the music, and it has been made into a Broadway musical that did quite well, is doing quite well. It's going to be on tour. I expect my wife and I will see it when it comes to Southern California late this year or next year. Anyway, we will see a framing device, okay, that's going to start it off. We're going to get some voiceover. We're going to kind of start at the end, and there's going to be a big mood shift. The movie opens up, and he is saying, right there, voiceover, "The love of my life has died," and it's in black and white and pretty down, and it is going to shift to almost crazy musical wacky in just 2 or 3 minutes. It's a real interesting mood shift. I don't see too many movies that start off in one very somber mood and then become very big and very bright and very loud within just a couple of minutes. But this film does. So if you're watching it, don't worry. It will take off pretty fast, and it'll change moods throughout the movie. But it starts off, and I was not sure that I wanted to start the movie showing my class. Oh my gosh, I'm going to turn everybody off. But the mood shifts quite quite nicely to a very high energy number of scenes. So Baz Luhrmann and the Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge means red windmill, by the way. And it was a famous nightclub. It still is kind of more, it's more of a tourist thing now. But there it is around 100 years ago or 120 years ago in Paris, in the Montmartre section of town. And there it is today with a whole bunch of tourists lining up to get in to buy overpriced drinks and so on. Another of his films that a lot of you have seen, I'm sure, Romeo and Juliet is the one that they show in high school a lot. It is Shakespeare's original language, right? That English from 400 years ago, right around 1600 or so. But it is set in the modern era of when the film was made, the 1990s. Leo, much younger then, playing Romeo, Claire Danes as Juliet, they are going to have, they're not going to have swords and all that kind of stuff. They're going to have guns, but on the side of the gun, it's going to say sword 9mm. So when somebody says, hand me my sword, and so on, that's what you'll see. And at one point, somebody's going to say, send this letter to Juliet post haste. And it looks like a FedEx truck drives up. It's a post haste delivery truck that drives up, and so they are going to send it to her post haste. It's kind of fun the way they keep the original Shakespeare language and set it in the modern time, the modern era. And Romeo and Juliet does have a drug thing. There is a potion or some such thing, a death potion or a death-like potion, so that works fairly well for the modern era. And then Great Gatsby, another film you might have seen in high school. This is a great way if I were a high school teacher and I were trying to get my English students, my English class students interested in literature or theater or something like that. There are a lot worse ways to go than Romeo and Juliet and Great Gatsby. You know, if you're trying to get them into Shakespeare and F. Scott Fitzgerald, that's a great way to go. So Leo again as Jay Gatsby, the bootlegger. He is kind of a gangster, not exactly the way Al Capone would have been, but it is set in the Roaring '20s when Prohibition was in effect, and bootleggers would get alcohol to people that wanted to be able to drink, and that's how, I think his name is Jay Gatz, and he reinvents himself so that he can meet his true love. He didn't think he was worthy of her attention or worthy of her love there, and he comes back and reinvents himself and throws the biggest and best parties in New York City at his huge, gigantic estate out in Long Island. And so the music that we're going to hear on the soundtrack to the film is going to be hip-hop and U2 and I can't remember, I don't know, Jay-Z or Beyonce or people, modern people on the soundtrack for The Great Gatsby. And so a little bit more of his anachronistic musical choices. Always real high energy. If you liked either of those movies from high school, I know you would love Moulin Rouge for sure. And there we go. That's it for this class, Class 10, Contemporary American Cinema. Thank you so much for joining me, and we will be back. I will be back with another class very shortly, within a week or so. In the meantime, enjoy the movies, and take care.